Basic elements of Python. So, greetings. My name is Agustin Emmanuel P, and today I'll be discussing the basic elements of the programming language Python. So, for us to fully understand how Python actually works, I will be providing some examples that will help us to gain more idea about this language, and as well explaining the structures of the selection control statement. So, without further ado, let's get started. For the basic elements of Python is data types. For the first basic elements of Python is we have data types. Data types in programming is a classification that specifies which type of value a variable has and what type of mathematical, relational, or logical operations can be applied to it without causing an error. So under the data types, we have string. So the string type is used to store a sequence of character or text. So this is not a built-in type, but it behaves like one in its most basic usage. String in Python are surrounded by either simple quotation marks or double quotation marks. So for example, single quotation mark hello is the same as double quotation mark hello. So you can display a string literal with the print plus an open parenthesis function. Now let's go for integer. Integer Integer data type is used to store a whole number without decimals like 35, -50, or 4500. The integer data type has two categories, signed integers and unsigned integers. Signed integers can store both positive and negative values, while unsigned integers can only store non-negative values. Third, we have our float. Float data type is a function used to return a floating point number from a number or a string. Also, float is method converts numbers stored in a string or integer into a floating point number or a number with a decimal point. Next, we have our boolean. Python boolean type is one of the built-in data types provided by Python, which represents one of the two values which are the true or false. Generally, it is used to represent the truth values of the expressions. So next we have list. The list is the most versatile data type available in Python, which can be written as a list of comma-separated values, items, between square brackets. The important thing about this list is that items in a list need not be of the same type. Creating a list is as simple as putting different comma-separated values between square brackets. Next, we have tuples. Tuples are used to store multiple items in a single variable. Tuple is one of the four built-in data types in Python used to store collection of data. So the other three are list, set, and dictionary, all with different qualities and usage. And last, we have dictionary. Dictionary in Python is an ordered collection of data values used to store data values like a map, which unlike other data types that hold only a single value as an element, dictionary holds the value pair. Key value is provided in the dictionary to make it more optimized. Second, in our basic elements, we have variable name and assignment. Python variable names are case sensitive and start with a letter or an underscore. A leading underscore may be used by convention to indicate a variable or function that is intended for local use only, but it has no second, in our basic elements, we have variable names and assignments. Python variable names are case sensitive and start with a letter or an underscore. A leading underscore may be used by convention to indicate a variable or function that is intended for local use only, but it has no special meaning for the Python interpreter. Names that start and end with double underscores, however, are used for special purposes, so to avoid confusion, you should not use such names for ordinary variables or functions. Third, we have functions. Computers are capable of doing calculations of staggering complexity, but when programs get too complex, they are likely to be full of bugs and hard to maintain. So the most fundamental construct for keeping complexity under control is the function. It is used It is a unit of code that takes well-defined inputs, perform well-defined operations, and yield well-defined outputs. It can be tested, it can be moved around, it can be used in multiple parts of program, and often in many different programs. Fourth, we have exceptions and tracebacks. If you have been experimenting with Python code, you will almost certainly have encountered exception and tracebacks. Exceptions are part of program flow control mechanism that is specially designed for handling errors or other exceptional conditions, but that can be used more generally. A traceback is the error report from an caught exception, showing the chain of function calls leading to the exception. And last, we have our classes. Classes. Classes are ubiquitous in Python but do not occur explicitly in older languages such as C and Fortran. Although the full description and discussion of classes in Python can trigger an avalanche of computer science jargon, they are really quite simple, intuitive, and easy to use, whether you realize are using them or not. Regardless of whether you write your own classes, and as well will show, this can be done in as little as 2 lines of code. You will find Python easier to read and write once you see some examples of how classes work. Next, we have the structures of the selection control statement that the programming language Python has. Python has 3 types of control structures. We have sequential default mode, selection used for decision and branching, and repetition used for looping, repeating a piece of code multiple times. Sequential. Sequential statements are a set of statements whose execution process happens in a sequence. The problem with sequential statements is that if the logic has broken in any one of the lines, then the complete source code execution will break. Second, we have selection. So selection decision control statements in Python. The selection statements are also known as decision control statements or branching statements. The selection statements allow a program to test several conditions and execute instruction based on which condition is true. Some decision control statements are simple if else, nested if, and if else. So for the last one, we have our repetition. Repetition statement is used to repeat a group or block of programming instructions. In Python, we generally have 2 loop scripts. So for the last one, we have the repetition. A repetition statement is used to repeat a group or block of programming instructions. So in Python, we generally have 2 loops, repetitive statements, for loop and while loop. A for loop is used to iterate over a sequence that is either a list, tuple, dictionaries, or a set. We can execute a set of statements once for each item in a list, tuple, or dictionary. While loop in Python. While loops are used to execute a block of statements repeatedly until a given condition is satisfied. Then the expression is checked again, and if it is still true, the body is executed again. This continues until the expression becomes false. So that's all for today. Thank you. I hope you learned something about this video.